Let's talk about recovery frames. So, the active frames of your move are over. This is the time the move enters the last phase in its life cycle, the recovery frames, during which your character returns back to its idle state from where he can perform his next action, be it movement, blocking, or performing another move. Here you can see a frame by frame breakdown of 29 recovery frames of Scorpion's back one move. Now the important thing to remember is that the recovery frames are there whether the move gets whiffed, gets blocked, or you manage to hit the opponent with it. So to fully understand recovery frames, we have to consider each scenario in its own. In the first case, you completely whiff your move and you don't even manage to connect it with your opponent. In the second case, you do manage to connect your move with your opponent, but your opponent correctly blocks it. And in the last one, you not only manage to connect your move with the opponent, but also manage to score a hit on him. The first two scenarios are not quite in your favor. However, the last scenario in which you manage to hit your opponent does indeed benefit you, and we will look why that's the case. In today's episode, we will only consider in detail the first scenario, while the next two will be covered each in their own videos. So there are possibly two reasons why you would whiff a move. The first one being you not knowing the exact spacing of your move. And the second reason is that the enemy moved out of the space in which you thought he would be in. In either case, the important thing to remember is that during the recovery phase, you are completely vulnerable to enemies' attacks and at the mercy of your opponent. In the previous episodes, we established this fact that frames are a currency in fighting games, with startup frames being the cost you have to pay in order to put your move's damaging part on the screen, and recovery frames on the other hand can be considered a cost you have to pay to get out of the move's animation so that you can perform your next action. It is during the recovery phase that the game calculates the frame advantage, and the exact amount of frame advantage and which player gets it depends on the move and how it interacted with the opponent. Taking this analogy into consideration, if you completely whiffed your move, then the game gives your opponent frame advantage equal to the number of recovery frames of the move you just whiffed. Here you see the idea of 29 frames of Scorpions being credited to Geras' account, which he can utilize in one of his own moves to punish you. So essentially, during that time, your opponent is free to do whatever he wants to do while you are stuck in the recovery frames of the move you just whiffed. You are donating free frames to your opponent, and your opponent can utilize those frames to punish you during your recovery. Here we see how Scorpion's incorrectly spaced move gets punished by Geras as Scorpion recovers from the move. Just like if you interrupt a move during its startup frames, that is considered a counter, attacking a whiffed move during its recovery frames is counted as a punish, and a notification for that is displayed on the screen. This is essentially whiff punishing in its purest form, although we sometimes do count counters as whiff punishes as well. Now, as recovery frames are closely related to whiff punishing, it's important to understand here that how whiff punishing can be done. The first point to note in this regard is to use an appropriate technique to move out of the space in which your opponent thinks you will be in. In most cases, moving or dashing backwards and then attacking with an appropriate ranged advancing move will be good enough. In other cases, jumping over the attacking player and then using a jump kick or a jump punch will be enough to punish the recovering opponent. You can also neutral jump in most cases, especially when jumping forward is not feasible. Also, there are moves like teleports and advancing specials which have a high move type. So if you're expecting one, you can punish their long recovery frames by ducking and then using a fast attack into a full combo. Here you see how Geras punishes Scorpion's high teleport with a down 2 crushing blow. In the second example, you see Shang Tsung waiting patiently by ducking and then punishing Liu Kang's flying kick as soon as he lands. The second thing to note is to use an adequately ranged fast startup move, because unless it can reach your opponent, it cannot punish him. Here we see Sub-Zero using a short-ranged move trying to punish Cabal, but as it cannot reach him, he is not successful. A much better choice would be to use a back one, which has a good enough range and results in a successful punish during recovery frames of Cabal's forward one move. Then, you also need to have good reactions, and that's something you develop over time and with practice. The thing is that unless you can react quickly to the whiffed move, even the longest and the fastest move will be of no use. Here we see how Sub-Zero is late in punishing Cabal's move, and Cabal is able to successfully block and save himself from getting whiff punished. The only window of opportunity for you to attack Cabal is during the recovery frames. If you don't cash it out, then you're too late. Now, along with good reactions, knowing the habits of your opponent is also very crucial. This is called reading your opponent. Here we see that as Sub-Zero closes in on Cabal, Cabal pokes him with a forward one move, keeping Sub-Zero effectively away. If Sub-Zero knows that this is what Cabal does every time he closes in, he can exploit this fact to whiff punish Cabal. Now to do so, Sub-Zero just pretends to close in on Cabal, and just as he enters the range of Cabal's forward one move, he predicts Cabal to throw out a forward one move, which he rightfully does. So by that time, Sub-Zero is already out of the range of Cabal's forward one move, and while Cabal is stuck in the recovery frames, Sub-Zero uses his back one move to punish him. So Sub-Zero successfully exploited a habit of Cabal and punished him for that. The last technique is a bit advanced, but being successful using it is very satisfactory and rewarding. It is known as conditioning your opponent, which essentially means to plant an idea in the mind of your opponent. Let's see an example to understand it. Here Sub-Zero closes in on blocking Cabal and throws him. He does it 3 times and Cabal gets this idea that whenever Sub-Zero is to close on him, he will get thrown. Sub-Zero knows that this idea has been planted in Cabal's mind and uses this fact to next time just close on him, expecting a counter down 2 from Cabal. He backs out and then whiff punishes Cabal during the recovery frames of his down 2 move. So concluding our discussion, recovery frames are closely related to whiff punishing. Because if you whiff your move, you are stuck in the recovery frames and cannot perform any action unless you get out of those frames. Most of the moves in the game, if whiffed, have long recovery frames, so it's always best to use the move in their appropriate ranges. For that purpose, you must go into practice mode and learn the ranges of your moves by heart. You also need to pay a close attention if your enemy is trying to whiff punish you, and don't fall into his trap. Instead, you must devise a counter strategy to nullify his attempt to whiff punish you. On the other hand, if you get an opportunity and see a whiffing opponent, you always need to cash that out, convert that whiff punish into a full combo, and take away your opponent's health. Then you also need to improve your reactions so that you can detect in time when a move is whiffed by your opponent. In addition to that, you also need to pay a close attention to what your opponent does in different situations so that you can capitalize on those situations to whiff punish your opponent. Lastly, always have a go-to whiff punishing move ready at all times. This is mostly applicable in mid and far ranges. All these points are important for you to understand recovery frames and to take an advantage of them when you get an opportunity. That's it for today's episode. If you like my content, be sure to subscribe and leave your feedback in the comments section. Next time, it is Mini Ninja signing out. Your subscription is mine.